Okay, it is Thursday. Oh no, today is Tuesday. Today is Tuesday. All right, let's go, Rock Fin. Let's do it. It's the rock to the fin. It's the rock to the fin. Rock to the fin. Rock, rock, fin. Rock to the fin. Rock to the fin.
Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Salvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday and welcome back, guys. I hope you had a great weekend. I hope yesterday was great for you as well. But welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And let's get this party started. So we have a lot of things to talk about today. I'm sure you're excited to hear some of these stories. We got a couple of laughs. I actually have I guess I don't want to say a tribute, but I do have a shout out that I want to give at the end of tonight's show. I think it's positive news that I think we'll all be glad to hear. But first, I want to start out by giving out kudos to people in the chat, and then we'll dive in. Shout out to Miguel, says peace. Greetings, Robin says, I can't wait for this live. Let's do this. Let's go. Shout out to CBC Voters, says hello to Miguel. Greetings, Pitchforks Are Coming, who's also a Sabby member, says hello, everyone. Shout out to Notori, who is dancing over there. Greetings, Joey says, hello, Sabby. I love your show. I wish you could be my granddaughter. Oh, that's really sweet, Joey. Really sweet. I don't have grandfathers that are still alive. So that's really sweet. Shout out to Bryce. Almost Sabby time. Fire show today with Nick and CJ. I love the RBN fam. Greetings, Hannah G says, ready for it. Shout out to Optimism. I will probably sneak off to Gun Greenwald in a minute. I've been on RBN for about 5 hours, but my like is hit and I'll circle back later. Good to know. Shout out to Kill Your Egorgers, says hello to Bryce. Greetings, Kat says, hello, everybody. I'm new to the neighborhood. Well, welcome. Over here, we get a little bit of spunky. We offer treats, hugs, cheers, and a little bit of sass. Shout out to Janice, says hello to Kat and says, welcome to the community. Greetings, Lawrence says, here early, very unlike me. What's going on? Mastermind says, hello, fam. Shout out to Terry, says, hello, Sabby in chat. Greetings, Lawrence, who's a Sabby member, says, doobie doobie do the damn thing. I'm trying to, Lawrence. I am trying. Shout out to Gamer, says, hello. Greetings. Marco says, sup, y'all, with a heart. Shout out to Eric, who's a Sabby member, says, hey there, lefty peeps. Greetings, Bad Cookies. Miss Sabby, in a world of grifting, bread tube sharks, you are the lone siren. Never change who you are. Thank you, Bad Cookies. That's really sweet. Greetings, Michael says, hey, everybody. Shout out to Ravina, who's a Sabby member, says, doobie doo. What's going on, Casey? Sends solidarity and fire. Shout out to Rick, says, hey, y'all. What's going on, New Sheep? Sends an exclamation mark. Shout out to Charlie, who's a Sabby member, says, hi, guys. Greetings. Joey, who's a Sabby member, says, booze who, folks? What's going on, Leroy, who's a Sabby member, says, good day, comrades. Peace and tap the like. That's right, guys. Go ahead and start us off right by smashing that like button. That helps me out with the algo. Thank you very much. What's going on? Whoever says, what's up to Terry? You guys are so sweet to each other. Shout out to Corey, who's a Sabby member, says, hello all. And what's up to Off the Rails, says Rick Solis, damn, hope it was a dry heat. I don't know what that's all about. But welcome all. I want to give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. You guys are doing the damn thing. You're keeping the lights on around here. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. There's also the Sabbies. That's like the meat of the sandwich here. And also members. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate that. And I want to give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Ryan Mabry. Dun, 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 dun. Shout out, shout out. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So much to discuss tonight. It was kind of difficult choosing stories, to be honest with you, because a lot's happened since I saw you on Sunday. But I think you'll appreciate what I chose to discuss. We got a little bit of foreign policy, a little bit of domestic. So we're going to get into that. So let's go ahead and share that fun thumbnail that you like to look at so much, or at least I think you like to look at it. I hope so. It's pretty simple. I, for one, do not have fancy thumbnails. I'm sorry. My graphic design skills are limited, limited to templates. So tonight we are discussing Tucker Carlson shocks Russell Brand. Now, they had an interview. I don't know if you guys saw that interview. It was quite long, but there are 2 portions of that interview I do want to discuss on here. There's one part that really surprised me, and I want to talk about that as well in reference to Tucker Carlson. But that interview actually went viral for Russell Brand. It's not often that you see people interview Tucker Carlson, so that was actually a big deal. I'm also going to discuss Cornell West versus Keith Olbermann. Keith Olbermann is the gentleman there in the glasses, and I have a lot to say about his rage that has been happening on Twitter against people like Cornell West. So I have some things to say about that tonight. We're also going to discuss KHANNA is lying for Joe Biden, of course, to help Joe Biden win, apparently, in 2024. There's a couple of things that is discussed in the interview that he has with Jen Psaki that I think people need to pay attention to. And we're also going to discuss, and I don't know if people have talked about this yet, but something is brewing with Turkey and Sweden. And why are they working together? And we're going to get into that story. Some people may consider that to be an unlikely pair, but trust me, there is a reason. There is always a reason. So first and foremost, I want to get into this discussion about Turkey and Sweden. Now, I don't know if you heard, but Turkey recently announced that they are backing Sweden's decision to join NATO. Now, some of you may wonder, why would Turkey really want to support Sweden here? What is this really all about? And you also have to keep in mind that we have seen a lot of changes happen in reference to foreign policy since this war with Russia and Ukraine. Not just BRICS expanding, not just them talking about their own currency, but other countries deciding whether or not they want to make moves as well. And Turkey is not alone. So let's get into this first clip here. Turkey agrees to support Sweden to join NATO. And this is NBC News.
There's also breaking news overseas tonight. Amid the war in Ukraine, NATO is set to expand. Sweden now one step closer to joining. It comes as President Biden joins other leaders tomorrow at a NATO summit in Lithuania. Peter Alexander is there tonight for us. And Peter, a lot of news breaking there.
Yeah, Tom, that's right. President Biden tonight is applauding Turkey after that surprise announcement that it is dropping its opposition to Sweden's bid to join NATO, a move that NATO's Secretary General tonight is calling a historic step.
Tonight, a stunning reversal ahead of Tuesday's NATO summit. Turkey agreeing to support Sweden's bid to join the NATO military alliance after a year of opposition. Turkish President Erdogan making the decision after talks with the NATO Secretary General.
Let's pause here for just a second. So notice that they said that Turkey actually had a year of opposition in reference to Sweden joining NATO. So in the beginning, they were not on board with this. So what could have changed? You know, Joe Biden just recently made a trip to Lithuania. Could it be partially because of Joe Biden? Or is there something else that Turkey wants in exchange? And I think you'll have to stay tuned for that.
President Biden also speaking with Erdogan, agreeing to meet in person tomorrow. After beginning his day in the United Kingdom, President Biden today enjoyed his first visit with King Charles. The two at Windsor Castle appearing relaxed, laughing and smiling together. The king seemingly unfazed as the president broke royal protocol, placing his hand on the king's back, before discussing climate initiatives, a personal passion for the king. It followed President Biden's face-to-face with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak ahead of this week's NATO summit in Lithuania. The president landing there tonight, just a few hundred miles from the fighting in Ukraine. With last month's rebellion exposing new cracks in Vladimir Putin's leadership, President Biden will look to fortify NATO, even as he dismissed Ukraine's push to join the alliance, raising concerns about how that would impact the joint defense agreement.
So let's just keep in mind here that, yes, NATO is expanding. I mean, we heard a story, it was a couple months ago, that Finland wanted to join NATO. For the most part, they're pretty neutral and try to stay out of these types of conflicts. But things are changing. And I really do believe that the U.S. government has pressured some of these countries to join NATO for it to expand. Also, this is another way to try to alienate Russia. But remember, Russia still does have BRICS, and they have a very powerful neighbor that is a part of BRICS with them, and that is China. So it seems like to me they're trying to get more countries to join NATO, to expand NATO more in an effort to continue to push back against Russia. But also, we need to talk about this idea of the NATO expansion. Now, when Cornell West was on here, I asked him if he thinks that NATO should be dismantled. He said, absolutely. There are other ways to go about foreign policy. There are other ways to go about making sure that countries get what they need instead of expanding NATO. And I think at this point in time, NATO should be done with. But no, that's not what the U.S. government wants, because the U.S. government wants to continue to support the military industrial complex because there is money there. That is also the reason why we have this issue with Russia and Ukraine. Again, they're going to try to prolong this war as much as they can. They'll continue to give billions of dollars to Ukraine in an effort to push back against Russia and try to implement regime change against Vladimir Putin.
It's a commitment that we've all made no matter what. If the war is going on, then we're all in the war. You know, we're at war with Russia, if that were the case.
Late tonight, a White House official telling NBC News President Biden is expected to meet with President Zelensky tomorrow here in Lithuania.
How many times is he going to meet with him? He just met with him recently. Like, how many times is he going to meet with him? He can meet with Zelensky over and over and over again, but he still hasn't made a visit to visit people in East Palestine, Ohio. He can't meet with people who are getting sick from breathing the air right here in the United States, but he can travel across seas to go meet with Zelensky multiple times. This is neglect. This is neglect against the American people. When you have people that are having illnesses, people that really need health care right now, people whose air has been contaminated, they can't drink the water, people are struggling to breathe, people are coughing up blood. Like, these are just some of the symptoms that have come out in reference to people in East Palestine, Ohio. Joe Biden doesn't want to see them at all because that is a Trump district, right? So they heavily supported Donald Trump. So he feels like they don't matter. But he can go across the ocean and visit Zelensky as many times as possible.
Traveling with the president, Peter Alexander, NBC News, Vilnius, Lithuania.
So now I told you, what does Turkey want in exchange? Is there something that they could be asking for as well? And yes, there is. Turkey actually wants to join the EU. Yes, you heard that right. I kid you not. Some of you may wonder, but why? That is what they're really gaming for here. Turkey wants to be a part of the EU. Let's get into this clip. Things are really changing, guys.
Ali, I want to start with you. Some big news. Tell us about it. Yeah, Kristen, just minutes ago, we heard from the NATO Secretary General who announced that an agreement had been made after we saw these conditions set by Turkish President Erdogan, saying essentially that if NATO wanted his support for Sweden's membership, Turkey would have to be accepted into the European Union, something.
What did I tell you? Miguel says Turkey wants it all. Turkey wants no more Thanksgiving. I hear you. So you hear that, right? Because people just don't make these type of arrangements. They've been opposing this for over a year, and now all of a sudden they're okay with it. You're not going to make that type of arrangement unless you're getting something in return. Why would Turkey want to join the EU? Could it have something to do with their economy? Could it have something to do with the fact that maybe they feel that there's strength in numbers? Maybe.
That has been opposed for decades now. And that really was thought to throw a wrench in what was supposed to be many discussions at this summit in Lithuania to really rally for Sweden's membership. Remember, it was supposed to happen weeks ago with Finland, and because of opposition from Turkey and Hungary, that was postponed. We have a new statement from the president reacting to this big decision. Just a few minutes ago, he says in part, quote, "I welcome the statement issued by Turkey, Sweden, and the NATO Secretary General this evening, including the commitment by President Erdogan." And he adds, "I stand ready to work with President Erdogan in Turkey on enhancing defense and deterrence in the Euro-Atlantic area." It's unclear, Kristen, whether Erdogan was able to negotiate that EU agreement, because before this, we had heard from the Secretary General saying that NATO and EU are two separate entities. They shouldn't be linked at all. These conditions have nothing to do with each other.
So you heard that part. These conditions have nothing to do with each other, and they should not be linked at all. So why is this happening here, folks? Why is this happening? Let's go on.
Essentially, so until we find that out, really the details of this agreement, so far it seems like this was a very positive progression, a very positive advancement, and it seems like this deal to get Sweden past the finish line seems finalized, Kristen.
Yeah, it was just an extraordinary about-face by Turkey. The leadership there staunchly opposed until, of course, NATO Secretary General tweeted that out. Why is it critical for the summit to reach this deal now, Allie, and what else are you tracking that's on the agenda there?
Yeah, well, this really put the president and the United States sort of in an awkward position, because the United States and U.S. officials have said that they support Turkey's membership into the European Union, but they've also added that they really have nothing to do with the situation and the decision is not up to them. So this decision happening now really takes a load off of the president as he prepares to meet with Erdogan tomorrow and have these discussions, and it really takes this topic off of sort of his to-do list when he meets with Erdogan, because there are so many other things that the president wants to focus on during this NATO summit. We've talked about that focus.
Well, Turkey's leader definitely switched that up in reference to Joe Biden. He definitely, oh, hold on one second. He definitely switched that up in reference to what Joe Biden had planned to happen. So there's that.
Focus specifically on President Zelensky's campaign to have Ukraine become a member of NATO. Remember, he's hoping for at least the framework of a deal to come out of this summit. But we've heard the president, as you played in that soundbite there, saying Ukraine is not ready. Other leaders of NATO allies have said as long as Ukraine is at war with Russia, this should just be not on the table, at the risk of having Russian aggression towards those Western allied countries for supporting Ukraine. The big question.
But they weren't worried about any type of Russian aggression when Joe Biden just made the decision to send cluster bombs to Ukraine. They weren't worried about Russian aggression in reference to that. Now, all of a sudden, it's an issue of Russian aggression. These are just some of the odd dealings in this, I feel like.
Question now is, in lieu of that NATO membership, that agreement, what sort of security compromise or deal could be made to help Ukraine defend itself while this war is still in effect? So the president is trying to really do this delicate dance of rallying support among these NATO allies while we're seeing divisions already, not just on that NATO membership of Ukraine, but also on that controversial decision you mentioned there for these cluster munitions to be sent to Ukraine, Kristen.
Yeah, Allie, let me follow up with you.
So there's already division. There's already people who are against this that don't agree with it, even though this is what Turkey wants. And what happens if Joe Biden says, I'm sorry, but no, you cannot be a part of the EU? What happens if those other countries push back and say, sorry, Turkey, you cannot join the EU? Does that mean that Sweden still gets to join NATO? This is just going to be very, very interesting. I think this is Turkey trying to play ball here in a sense that, like, we're not going to do anything that you want in reference to NATO expansion unless you make us a part of the EU. In other words, they're asking for concessions. Imagine that.
On that point, because in a letter to the president, 19 progressive Democrats actually condemned the decision to send those cluster bombs to Ukraine. What is the White House saying about this backlash from some members within his own party?
Yeah, the president facing backlash, not just from these world leaders, these NATO allies, but also from members of his own party here in the United States. And while this pushback from these progressives, while it is rare, it wasn't all too surprising because we had seen these progressive members of Congress speak out against the use of these cluster munitions for months now. They had even tried to get the president to sign off on a ban within the U.S. military for using these cluster munitions. So the administration, the president is standing by this decision, defending this decision, saying really the alternative to not send these cluster munitions just wasn't an option, that these cluster munitions will help Ukraine stay in the fight while they still struggle during their counteroffensive, Kristen.
Remember what I said before when we discussed this the other day, that cluster ammunitions are considered to be a war crime. Jen Psaki, when she was press secretary, she stated that herself. So it seems to be okay when the U.S. government wants to participate in war crimes, but it's not okay when another country wants to participate in war crimes. So there's a lot of hypocrisy here when it comes to the U.S. government. And I think more people need to call that out. But there's something else that I want to mention as well when we talk about Turkey being a part of the EU. It's interesting because then I have to think about a country like Greece. You see, there is a conflict between Turkey and Greece. And yes, Greece is a part of the EU. So how is this going to work out? Here's a little short clip to explain to you this conflict here with Turkey and Greece. Now, it's a YouTube short, so bear with me. They don't really let you zoom in on these things, but here we go.
Are Greece and Turkey about to go to war? The two countries are NATO members, which would put the treaty organization in a massive commotion. But in recent days, Turkey's President Erdogan has gone so far as to threaten Athens with missile strikes. What's behind the current rise in hostilities? Erdogan is known for his bellicose rhetoric, and the two countries have a long-time territorial dispute. However,
so if he wants to threaten Greece with missile strikes, wouldn't it be a little awkward if he's also a part of the EU? Interesting.
The current hostilities started over military exercises in the Aegean Sea. Greece deployed soldiers and weapons on some islands near its coast, and Turkey claims this violates the island's non-military status. But Greece says it's following the law of the sea, and that Turkey has its own powerful military force not far from the islands. The two countries have come to the brink of war 3 times in the last 50 years, but now a new factor might be playing a role. Both countries have an interest in claiming drilling rights in the Mediterranean, hoping to hit energy gold. Right now, most people assume Erdogan is just making threats, but if things deteriorate, NATO might find itself in one of the trickiest situations in its history.
So notice they
Republican
mentioned
Senator Lindsey Graham just got.
Sorry.
Are Greece and Turkey?
Notice that they mentioned drilling permits. So again, there's money involved. As usual, there is money involved. Now, let's take a look at these countries that are part of the EU, because what's really interesting to me, technically, well, I guess not even technically anymore, but Even the UK is not a part of the EU. Let's take a look at the countries that are part of the European Union. Now, this is as of 2023. So take a look at this. So they're all the yellow countries right here, but they're listed here. Countries in the EU: Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland. Second column: France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg. And third column: Malta, Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, and Sweden. So where is Turkey going to fit in there? Really interesting. Really interesting. I don't know, man. We'll have to wait and see how this unfolds and if this actually happens. But I think it's going to be a little bit awkward for Turkey to be a part of the EU when they do have this conflict with Greece, which is also a part of the EU. So that should be interesting. Desert Manta says Turkey is hurt economically and Turkey wants US F-16s. There you go. Thank you so much for the super chat, C. Inwoke. Thank you so much. Resist says you can't fry a turkey without grease. Oh my God. You guys got jokes tonight. Well. Okay. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next story. God. So Ro Khanna had an interview recently with Jen Psaki in reference to how to get voters to come out to support Joe Biden in 2024. Now, the big issue that is being addressed here is the fact that young voters are starting to show disappointment and lack of support for Joe Biden, particularly since the catastrophe with the student loan cancellation. Many more things, right? Not codifying Roe v. Wade, et cetera, et cetera. These are two particular issues that really drove Gen Z to come out to the midterms in November and support Joe Biden, not Joe Biden, but Democrat politicians so that the Democrats could, gain that lead in the Senate. They did lose the House, so we know how that panned out. And now there seems to be this sense of desperation for other politicians in DC that are Democrats because they're starting to see Joe Biden might have a big problem on his hands, particularly considering the fact that there are other candidates that are running against him, which do seem to be more appealing, particularly to younger voters. So this is 4 clips. I want to start with this first one and shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. It says Ro Khanna discusses the lack of enthusiasm from young people as Biden fails on student loan forgiveness. Let's get into it.
It's no secret that young people tend to support progressive causes, and they historically vote for Democrats. That gap has only grown wider after last year's midterm elections. Here are some numbers to chew on. In 2020, a whopping 50% of young people ages 18 to 29 turned out to vote, which was an 11-point increase from 2016.
But let's remember, those people turned out to vote not because they were excited about Joe Biden, but it was because they didn't want Donald Trump. And they were worried about things like student loan debt. And they were worried about things like Roe v. Wade, et cetera. Like they were worried about those particular issues. So that's why young voters came out to support. It wasn't that they were crazy about Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders actually had captured that youth base, right? And Joe Biden had captured the boomer base, people who were like 65 or 60 and older. So you know that this was fear politics that brought them out, and they still didn't get the things that they were actually, fighting for, championing for. Just have to add that in there because she won't.
And even in 2022, about 27% of voters under the age of 30 cast a ballot during a midterm election, which traditionally have much lower turnouts. That's the highest youth turnout number in the last 30 years.
But remember, they came out in the midterms the way that they did was because of student loan debt cancellation. And of course, also because the Supreme Court did overturn Roe v. Wade. That's what drove them out.
And that made a huge difference for Democrats in swing states. Consider that 70% of voters between the ages of 18 and 29 voted for then Senate candidate John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. Compare that to 55% of voters between the ages of 30 and 40. Overall, 63% of young voters broke for Democratic House candidates in last year's election. Among young voters of color, it's an even bigger margin, 80.
And they still lost the House. So what does that tell you? They still lost the House, and you had Gen Z voters show up in record numbers for midterms, and the Democrats still managed to lose the House.
9% of Black youth, 68% of Latino youth voted for House Democratic candidates, compared to 58% of young white voters. But there have also been a number of crushing blows to progressive priorities in the last few weeks because of the Supreme Court decisions on student loans and affirmative action. So are those decisions energizing? Are they deflating? Where will the blame be placed? And for
the blame needs to be placed at the Democratic Party, and I want to explain why. When it comes to student loan debt, again, I explained to you multiple times on the show that Joe Biden did not follow instructions. He was supposed to cancel student loan debt through the Higher Education Act of 1965. He also could have done this via executive order. He chose to do it through the HEROES Act, which actually made it more difficult. Also, we were not in a state of emergency at that point in time anymore because the pandemic emergency had been lifted by him. Also, there's also the fact that, I'm sorry, he just really messed this up. There's also the fact that in reference to the Supreme Court, Joe Biden knew that this was a possibility that they could come in and overturn it if it was struck down by a federal judge. Now, because he chose to do it the way that he did, that gave a federal judge the opportunity and time to come in and do just that. He also chose to means test canceling student loan debt, which created more paperwork and it takes longer. So there is that piece. You blame the Democratic Party for that. When it comes to the issue in reference to Roe v. Wade, let's go back to President Obama's 2008 campaign. He said it would be the first thing that he would do was to codify Roe v. Wade. And as soon as he was elected, he said that he was not going to make that a priority. Now, there are many excuses that came out about this. There was Lieberman as one of the excuses that we can't do it because of Lieberman. Just like people say now, we can't do something because of Joe Manchin. It's a rotating villain. There will always be someone. But what they could have done, what Obama could have done, is he could have removed the filibuster. And he chose not to do that either. The Democrats had plenty of time. This could have been done under Bill Clinton. Okay, so this goes way, way back. And they knew there was always a possibility, because it was not codified into law, that the Supreme Court could come in and strike it down. So I blame the Democratic Party for both of those issues. That's who you should blame.
Progressives who are not yet energized by the 2024 election, what will it take to get them there? Joining me now is Congressman Ro Khanna of California, who's been a big champion for progressive causes that young people care about. He's a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus in the House. He was the co-chair of Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign. So I want to start by getting your take on something a New York Times analysis piece said about how these Supreme Court rulings offer Democrats a potential way forward. The analysis said, quote, "The court's decision could fuel broader outreach to the working class voters who have drifted away from the party because of what they see as its elitism." Of course,
pause right here. The court's decision could fuel broader outreach to the working class voters who have drifted away from the party because of what they see as elitism. No. You talk to most working class people, they're not thinking about voting. Most of them are not even watching this. They're not watching mainstream media. They're not, you know why? They're too busy working. They're working 2 and 3 jobs. They're working jobs where they're not even, allowed off by their boss to vote on election day. Let's remember, election day is not a holiday in this country as it is in some other countries like Colombia. So they're actually not thinking about this. I don't know. I don't know what they think this is supposed to be, but let's talk about the elitism piece. The Democratic Party, yes, it is elitist. It is corporate. The DNC itself is a corporation. But does that mean that that is going to push working class people to come out? No. When you make these types of statements, what you tell working class people is that, you know what, this party doesn't care about me. Instead of addressing the fact of younger voters coming out to support the Democratic Party, what should be, I feel, criticized heavily by people like Jen Psaki is the fact that the Democratic Party allowed it to get to be this way. The fact that the Democratic Party allowed itself to turn into this elitist corporation that's only for people who have graduated from like Harvard and Yale and participate in this type of industry that attracts people like Goldman Sachs. We need to talk about that. So again, that ownership, once again, is on the Democratic Party, not on the workers and not on Gen Z.
You agree with that, but if you do, how do you think Democrats could use these recent rulings to more effectively reach out to working class voters?
Okay, so let's go to clip number 2 where he answers that question here. So let me pause that for a second and bring it on up on the screen.
Well, Jen, the court is moving us backwards, and young people in particular are outraged that the court is taking away the relief of student loans. They're moving to a time where colleges used to be just for the wealthy and largely white. So I do think this can energize young people in particular. On working class voters, I think what the president is doing in Bidenomics and saying, I'm delivering what Trump promised is probably the most effective message we have.
That was not a good answer to that question. Joe Biden has not been delivering in reference to working class people. That's why working class people are still heavily upset with him. That's why his approval rating is what it is. That's why someone like RFK Jr. is polling the way that he is against the incumbent Democrat president. This is why 70% of Democrats don't want Joe Biden to run again. If he was actually delivering for working class people, that percentage would be different. He's not. And Ro Khanna knows this. We've had this discussion on my show. I had this discussion with Ro Khanna on my show. Joe Biden is not delivering. You know, distributing the American Rescue Plan, this one-time plan, that does not change the lives of everyday working class people. That's just a one-time thing. When you don't increase the minimum wage, which was struck down, by the way, 8 Democrats in the Senate voted against a $15 minimum wage. Now, you expect the Republicans to vote against it, but you need to tell me why those 8 Democrats voted against it. And it's not just Manchin and Sinema, obviously, if there were 8. So that's something to think about. The fact that I've showed you with the recent cost of living report, in a majority of the states in this country, you need to make more than $15 an hour just to make a living for yourself, a life for yourself in this country. They don't even want you to make less than that. They don't even want to give you 15. And you really should be getting more than that to even have a 2-bedroom apartment in most states in this country. So he has not delivered for the working class people. A lot of these politicians want to bring up the child tax credit, the same child tax credit that they cut. They stopped early, stopped abruptly. Again, not delivering for the working class people. But Ro Khanna has already had his talking points. He knows what he's supposed to say when he comes onto these shows and he has these interviews. And that's because I believe Ro Khanna himself is getting ready to run for president, probably in 2028. So he knows he has to play the game. Same thing with AOC. That's why she's backing Joe Biden instead of people who are running on progressive policies. They have chosen to be career politicians, even if that means lying to the American people.
So you've said that President Biden should run on term limits for the Supreme Court, something a number of people have called for, a growing number of people. How can you articulate for me, how does it connect something like that may sound a little bit obscure, term limits, to voters and getting them excited about the election and getting out?
So here's my big question. Why do they do this? Why is Jen Psaki asking Ro Khanna how to get young people to turn out instead of asking young people theirself? Have you guys ever noticed that they do this? Ro Khanna, what could be done to get young voters to show up in 2024? How the hell does he know? Ro Khanna's not a young voter. He's a politician. And he's going to say what he needs to say to back Joe Biden. How come you never see them on the street interviewing younger people? Why don't they go to some of these colleges, these universities? Why don't they go to places where some of these younger people are working, like Dunkin' Donuts, Outback Steakhouse. Why don't they interview some of these young people that are working like these 2 jobs and ask them, what would it take for you to come out and vote? And more importantly, why aren't they asking non-voters? Not the people who voted in November, but the people who are younger voters in that age group that they discuss, 18 to 29, that don't vote at all. Why aren't they interviewing those people? And I'm going to tell you why. They don't interview those people because they know what they're going to say, and it won't be good for the Democratic Party or their network. Because those people who I have interviewed are going to tell you there's no sense in me doing it because nothing's going to change. Because the Democratic Party has not delivered. So why would I take a day off from work that I'm probably not going to get paid for? Hello. If you worked in the restaurant industry, you know this is true, right? Why should I take a day off from work that I'm not going to get paid for, stand in line for hours to vote for someone who's not going to deliver on the promises anyway? This is why we have more non-voters in this country than we have voters. But she's going to ask Ro Khanna as if Ro Khanna knows. Okay.
Well, voters know that the court is just out of touch with their lives, that the court is taking away their rights, taking away women's rights to control their own body, taking away students' relief in terms of the student loans. The president forgave the loans. The Supreme Court took that money away. And they see these justices, they see all the ethical conflicts, and they're saying, enough with it. Let's have a clean slate. And term limits, by the way, has support not just from Democrats and independents, but also Republicans. And it's something the president's own commission has recommended.
It's not just about the term limits, though, because I want to bring up the bigger issue in reference to the Supreme Court. Now, he says the Supreme Court members, you know, they're out of touch. I agree. But so is the Democratic Party. The majority of Americans wanted Medicare for all. Democratic Party says, nah. The majority of Americans want a living wage. Democratic Party says, nah. They're in line with the Republican Party on those 2 issues. You know, it's just, they don't want to give everybody health care in this country. So you have 2 corporate parties, again, that serve corporate interests, not the interests of the people. So it's not just the Supreme Court. But here's the bigger problem in reference to SCOTUS. You have 9 justices that make decisions for the American people who most of us have never even met. Most of us never hear from these people. Most of us will never ever meet these justices. But they make life-changing decisions for the rest of us, and they have a life appointment. And we don't even get to vote for them. How was this even decided in this country? Let's think about this for a second. Do you think that it is fair that we have people who are hand-selected by other politicians who serve corporate interests to serve a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court? And they're voting in such a way that makes, you know, changes our everyday life, huge decisions like Roe v. Wade. And we have no say in that process. How do you guys think that's okay? I don't think that's okay. How come we don't get to participate in that process in reference to whether or not these justices should be sitting on the Supreme Court? How come the American people don't get to vote on that? You have a couple of finalists, everybody vote. That is direct democracy, correct? But we have no say so. And they are changing our lives. 9 people, lifetime appointment, and we will never meet these people. Think about that.
Now, you've called for term limits. Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi has called for term limits. As you said, a number of people who aren't even Democrats. You have stopped short of calling for court expansion, which a lot of progressive groups have been calling for. As you've seen kind of these ethics violations and all of the rulings recently, have you rethought that at all?
I've said everything should be on the table, but I was recently watching the FDR miniseries, and I saw that even FDR had trouble with it. And so it's not an easy thing to do. Often people see that it is polarizing or partisan. And I guess term limits is an easier first step that would reform the court, calling for term limits and a judicial code of conduct of ethics. You know, even Republicans in Congress, if we go out and have someone buy us lunch, the vast majority of us would have to disclose it and have all these ethics rules. I'm just flabbergasted that the Supreme Court doesn't have any of those.
Is he really flabbergasted, though? I mean, Ro, you've been there for a hot minute. This is not something that is new. So let's think about that for a second. I want to go to the third clip here. Ro Khanna discusses the lack of enthusiasm from young people as Biden fails on student loan forgiveness. So wait for this one. Here we go.
You're absolutely right. The limits are so low for members of Congress, anybody who works in the federal government, and this is just a different set of rules. So your fellow Progressive Caucus member, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has called for Chief Justice John Roberts to be subpoenaed by Congress. Would you support that?
Well, I would support hearings. I think that the Chief Justice should testify. You know what? Look, I've met the Chief Justice. I met him a couple of years ago, and he's...
Pause right there. You see the difference between us and them? Ro Khanna said that he met the Chief Justice. You won't. I won't. Think about that. They have access to the justices. This is the difference here.
That he cared about the legitimacy of the court, the legitimacy of democracy. Well, if he cares about the legitimacy of democracy, he should come testify. In past times, Supreme Court justices would meet with members of Congress and the Senate. It used to be common. Part of the whole problem here, Jen, is they're so cloistered. They're so out of touch. They don't have a sense of what life is like. So my plea to him would be, for the good of democracy, come testify. What are you afraid of?
And if he doesn't, would you support issuing a subpoena to get him to testify?
Well, I defer to what the Senate committee, which has that, decides, and I defer to Senator Schumer on that.
That's a no. Of course he would defer. That's his way of basically saying no without saying the word no. He doesn't have the cojones to actually come out and say, yes, I support that he should be subpoenaed. So he's going to defer to some committee.
So let's talk a little bit about student loans, because you've been very outspoken on this for a long time. In the wake of the Supreme Court decision, the administration announced some steps, including repayment plans tied to income, but they didn't announce a pause or an extension of the pause. Do you think the plan that they've announced is enough, or would you like to see them do more?
It's a good first step, but they can do more, and they should do more. I mean, look, I had student loans growing up. I was fortunate to be able to pay them back, over $100,000. I don't think it.
He had over $100,000 of student loan debt, and he was fortunate to pay it back. He mentioned this too when he was on my show. So that tells you how much money Ro Khanna was making. If you're graduating college right now and you have over $100,000 in student loan debt, good luck. Good luck. I know people who are doctors and lawyers that will never be able to pay off their student loan debt. So, yeah.
They should be forgiving loans for people like me who've done well. But we're talking about folks who are largely from working class and middle class families. Under the Higher Education Act, they should at least stop the interest payments. People who were promised this relief shouldn't be having their interest accrue come September until these loans are forgiven. And they should extend the pause. And under the Higher Education Act, even with the debt relief deal, they're able to have a new pause. And I think that would show students around this country, young voters, that we're really fighting for them.
So let me say something here, and then we'll go to the next clip because there's one more, I believe. This issue with the student loan debt is going to be a big problem. We talked about this a couple of days ago. There was a clip of a gentleman, I played the TikTok clip, and he was talking about how this is basically going to be the new housing crisis, because what's happening is there is no accountability on the colleges in reference to the cost of tuition. So they can continue to increase tuition as much as they want. And then on top of that, as the tuition continues to increase, then you have more students taking out more debt. The problem is the wages, number one, have not adjusted for inflation. And then two, the wages that those kids should earn for those jobs that require a bachelor's degree, it doesn't match if you compare it to what our parents' generation was making when they graduated from college and they had jobs where the wages actually made sense and they were actually able to start a life. So there's a difference between someone graduating today and having to take out $100,000 in student loan debt for the same degree that your parents got or your grandparents got, and they didn't have anywhere near as much student loan debt. There's a big difference. And the problem is there's no accountability to the colleges. I know, guys, I worked in higher ed for over 10 years. And I'm here to tell you that college is a business. It's not even so much about you go to the school, you get this degree, you're guaranteed to get this job. No, you're not. You don't even know if that industry is going to be profitable by the time that you graduate after 4 years now. There's also technology that has changed a lot in reference to jobs in this country. So you really don't know. And what I've seen a lot of students graduate with all this debt within the past couple of years, and they're not getting the jobs for the fields that they actually majored in because those companies are not hiring more people because they've been able to replace some of the positions with technology. And for those of you going to these coding boot camps, I got news for you too, because I have friends who are software engineers, and I'm here to let you know, if you think that your safe bet is going to be coding or to be a software engineer, AI can code, boo. It's only a matter of time before that's taken away from people. But the colleges continue to make money, and this is a big part of the problem. They'll continue and to offer majors that they know are not profitable in the job market. So let's go to the final clip here.
As you look to 2024, and as somebody who's been very outspoken on a number of progressive issues and causes, what is your biggest concern looking ahead to 2024? And is there a message you'd like to hear more from Democrats or even the president to get people excited about the election?
The question is, what is your biggest concern? Listen to his response.
Two concerns. One, let's not take young voters for granted. They're never going to vote for Donald Trump or DeSantis, but we need them as energized as they were in 2020, getting folks out to vote. And the issues they care most about are climate. The Willow Glen drilling was a mistake, in my view. Mountain Valley Pipe.
Let's go back. Pay close attention. Number one issue.
Two concerns. One, let's not take young voters for granted.
Vote. His number one concern is getting young voters out to vote for the Democratic Party. Let's all remember that from the same person who considers himself to be progressive, so to speak. That's all they care about. Come out and vote. Pass the Voting Rights Act so you can come out and vote for Democrats. Not independents, though. Not third party. Don't vote for those people. Come only vote for the Democratic Party, and that's it. That's his number one concern, considering what's happening right now in this country. Not the economy, not Medicare for all, which he claims to care so much about. Not those things. Voting. Let's go on.
They're never going to vote for Donald Trump or DeSantis, but we need them as energized as they were in 2020, getting folks.
I wouldn't put that past people, by the way. Never going to vote for Trump or DeSantis. Just because people are young doesn't mean they're going to vote for the Democratic Party. So I wouldn't put that past young people if I were you, KHANNA.
Folks out to vote. And the issues they care most about are climate. The Willow Glen drilling was a mistake, in my view. Mountain Valley Pipeline, but we did have the Inflation Reduction Act. But we've got to do far more on climate, and we've got to fight for student loans and student loan relief so they know we're actually trying to improve their lives.
Pause. The Willow Project, which KHANNA leaves out, but I think you really need to know, that project was already agreed upon when Joe Biden was running for office, and he said there would be no more drilling. Remember that? Remember that? No new drilling? And then it was revealed, I told you a couple weeks ago, that it was already decided. He had already agreed to do the Willow Project. So when KHANNA tells you that the Willow Project was a mistake, it's not that it was a mistake if it was already decided. Joe Biden hasn't backed down on it. Climate activists obviously have been pressuring him, but that isn't going to change his mind because it was already written in stone. So what Ro Khanna should do is just call it like it is and just say it was wrong, not it's a mistake. It was wrong for President Biden to agree on the Willow Project. That's what he should be saying.
The second thing I would say is what the president did in Chicago with Bidenomics. I mean, Trump went around this country saying communities had been left out. People were wronged. And you know what? They were wronged. We had massive deindustrialization in this country. I was just in Lordstown, Johnstown. Some of those places haven't come back. But the president needs to say he's the one, after 40 years, who's righting the ship, who's bringing manufacturing back.
In other words, he wants Joe Biden to say things that's actually not happening. He wants Joe Biden to lie. Remember, Ro Khanna told you all last year, we just got to tell the story better. We have to sell the story. And that's what it's about. He's a salesman. A lot of these politicians are salesmen. That's it. They're just trying to sell you something so that they get your vote. So he believes Joe Biden should just continue to lie to people so that they'll vote for him.
Standing up for the working class. Trump may have expressed grievances, but he's delivering. And I think those two messages combined will give him a decisive victory in 2024.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you so much for your time today.
So Ro Khanna believes that all Joe Biden has to do is basically just lie, and that'll give him the victory in 2024, because those things aren't happening that he said. Let's be real. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. All right. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. SCOTUS is not as powerful as we make them out to be. They have the illusion of power put forth by Congress, who pulled a bait and switch by saying, hey, there's nothing we can do. It is those guys. Don't be fooled. Congress is supposed to be the activist branch, yet they make it seem that way. Why do they do that? Because they know we can't hold them accountable like we can them. So they point us over there. Interesting. Congress has the power to overturn any SCOTUS ruling by making an edit to the law, craft a new law, or introduce a constitutional amendment. Yeah, but they know it's not going to pass, and that's why they're not doing it. Even when it comes to Roe v. Wade, they know it's not going to pass. That's why they're not even trying to do it. Introduce a constitutional amendment to place the 18-year term limits on SCOTUS and apply to SCOTUS the same code of conduct they apply to the lower courts. Matter of fact, let's realize Mike Graval's dream and introduce a national ballot initiative amendment allowing voters to ratify amendments to the U.S. Constitution and pass federal law. Well said. I'm going to go to some of these comments here. Lawrence said, notice Roe doesn't speak to independent media anymore. No, he does. He still goes on independent media. I've still seen him on independent channels. He's gone on channels way smaller than mine, too. I just didn't invite him back on here. Because when he came on last time, he tried to snowball people and gaslight people. And I said, no, I don't need to talk to Roe no more. Smooth says, don't get it. In Canada, we have advanced voting. Polls open until 9 p.m. and the right to leave work to go and vote. In big cities, polling is walking distance, no lines, etc. Yeah, well, it's on purpose here because our politicians are bought and paid for. They're hand selected. She's Black says Nancy actually called the judge term limits SMH. Are you kidding me? How long has Nancy been in office? Congress needs term limits. Well said. X Colin says he should have access. He is part of a branch of government. You should also have access. That's the point that I want to get across. We really have to expand our minds here. We should not just tell ourselves, well, this is the way it is, so that's how it is. No, you should also have access because they're making decisions that affect our lives. Oz says the system in the United States is rigged for the corporations and rigged against the people. 100%. 100. Okay. This next story, brace yourself, because there's a lot to be said. You know, Cornell West running for president, Green Party, he has received a lot of criticism from people because he's not running the Democratic Party. But even if he were to run through the Democratic Party, they'd still criticize him the same way they are RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson and telling them get out the way and just give it to Biden. So I call BS on all of that. But Cornel West is anti-war, anti-imperialist, and he's been very vocal about that. Recently, he tweeted something, and there's a gentleman by the name of Keith Olbermann who decided to come at Cornel West, and we're going to get into that in just a second. So Dr. West tweeted, "Let us not be deceived. NATO is an expanding instrument of the U.S. global power that provoked Russia into a criminal invasion and occupation of Ukraine." So first and foremost, where's the lie? He goes on to say, this proxy war between the American Empire and the Russian Federation could lead to World War III. Correct again. We must stop the war and war crimes, including cluster bombs used by all parties, and embark on diplomatic talks that should lead to a just peace. As the great W.E.B. Du Bois wrote in 1945, I seem to see outlined a third world war based on the suppression of Asia and the strangling of Russia. The Democratic Party is a party of war in Wall Street targeting Russia and China. Again, where's the lie? And he finishes with this. Let us save our democracy and world by dismantling U.S. militarism at home, as in cop cities, and abroad, as Martin Luther King Jr. painfully reminded us. This tweet received 4.8 million views. It got over 23,000 likes. Okay. So that is just Cornel West doing his thing, minding his own business. In comes Keith. Now, before we get into this, I need to tell you who Keith Olbermann is. Keith Olbermann, he was a former MSNBC commentator, go figure. He was also a sports commentator at one point. He's very much Team Biden. He's been very nasty on Twitter, particularly to Black people on Twitter. And we're going to get into all of that. But Keith is for the status quo. So he decided to respond to that tweet from Dr. West and said, fuck off. Now, what about Dr. West's tweet triggered him so much? What about it, guys? Here is Dr. West telling you we need to call for peace. And his response is, fuck off. Rude, arrogant, nasty. He went on to say he undone his entire career by getting manipulated into helping Trump. He can completely fuck off. You too. Now that's him responding to Chris, who said such a nice guy here. Now, Chris said that in reference to Keith. Chris was being sarcastic, of course. And he goes on to say he's undone his entire career by getting manipulated into helping Trump. He can completely fuck off. You too. So let's talk about something for a second. This is Keith Olbermann telling you that apparently he doesn't seem to think that Dr. West is intelligent enough to not allow himself to become manipulated. Keith doesn't want to stop and do the research for himself because he's been an MSNBC brain for too damn long. Keith doesn't want to look up what Dr. West said because he doesn't want to be proved wrong. Keith is there to keep the status quo. So since he can't dismantle what Dr. West said in reference to the war, he uses something else to fight back against him and says he's manipulated into helping Trump. In other words, he tries to smear Dr. West as being right-wing. This is exactly what people do when they can't refute your argument. These status quo liberals, they smear you as being right wing. This comment has nothing to do with what Dr. West said. And for the people who will come and say, well, Trump doesn't think the war should happen. A lot of people don't think the war should happen. Not just Donald Trump. Jill Stein doesn't think the war should happen. Medea Benjamin, who is a Democrat, by the way, doesn't think the war should happen. She protests against wars for years and heavily against this one. But this is Keith showing his whole ass. The arrogance of this man. He's angry because Dr. West is running as a third-party candidate. That's what this is really about. It has nothing to do with what Dr. West said about that war. So I had some things to say to Keith. So I had to tell him, get off the plantation, Keith. This is the second time I've seen you disrespect Black people on this site. You're the white moderate MLK warned us about. And I'm going to go into detail and explain to you how that is. I went on to say more because I was lit last night. Like after that, I said, oh no, we're going all in. So I retweeted and I said, witness Keith Olbermann's disrespect for Cornell West. It is the same disrespect he had for the Black female college basketball player. That's Angel Reese. Keith is the white moderate MLK warned you about. When Black people don't get in line, he loses it. He's still on the plantation. Now, let me explain to you what I mean by that. Keith's still on the plantation. You see, Keith, he's one of like those, the white liberals that like, they support the Democratic Party and they want Black people to believe that they're your friend and they support you too. They're the same ones that'll have a Black Lives Matter sign in their yard or their window of their apartment, his penthouse apartment in Manhattan. They're all for you and support you as long as you do what they want you to do. The moment you step out of line, they don't want to support you either. They will even go as far as to smear you. The moment you decide to use a different strategy, they're like, the hell with you. How dare you do what I didn't tell you to do? Cocky white liberals like Keith Olbermann. Keith Olbermann. And I've seen a lot of them here in Massachusetts. I'm keeping real. A lot of them. Black Lives Matter sign in the window of their apartment, front lawn of the house. They support your Black lives. But as soon as you move into their neighborhood, they want you gone. They'll be the first ones to call the police when they see you walking around their neighborhood. That's the Keith Olbermann liberals. Keith Olbermann will tell you that that's MAGA. Nah, that's people like him. The ones who smile in your face. The ones who sit up there and tell you, I voted for Obama twice. Those liberals. Those are the ones you really need to be worried about. They're totally fine with you until you try to change the status quo. Then they see you as a problem. Let's go on. I went on to say, because Keith got it. I had to get into Keith last night. Keith wears the typical, I'm smart white liberal, so listen to me, black rimmed glasses. You ever notice this? The same ones who tell you this shit. Him, Rachel Maddow, Sam Cedar, what they all got in common? Let me put on the black rimmed glasses. I'm here, the great white savior, to help out the poor Black folks in the hood. Just don't come into my neighborhood, though. Every time. I voted for Obama twice. went on to say, claims he cares about social rights, but Keith and many like him will kick you out and gentrify your neighborhood. This is why the white moderate is dangerous. And this is a fact. And I've seen it. Not only will they kick you out of your own neighborhood, okay, they'll gentrify your neighborhood. And the few black people who are left for the time being, they'll have the nerve to question you and ask you what you're doing on that block. Where are you coming from? Where are you going? Is there a reason you're on this street? Go back into the apartment and pick up the phone and call the cops. They're the Amy Coopers. The Amy Cooper who called the cops on the black guy who was bird watching in Central Park. Hillary Clinton voter. Those the ones you need to worry about. The ones who tell you, let's go to get together and go do yoga, and then we can go have a spa day, and it's all on me. And don't you dare worry about paying me back. This is all on me. Your people go through so much. Those kind of liberals, damn it. And yes, I've heard people say shit like that to me. All the assumptions, the gall, the audacity. Let me go help out Jamal in Roxbury. Let me go back to Newton and tell all the rich white women how I helped out the poor black kid in Roxbury. The moment the schools in Newton say, let's start busing some of the kids from Roxbury to Newton so they can have a decent education. Well, how many of them do you want here? We don't want too many. Okay, maybe one or two, but any more than that is a gain. Those white liberals, damn it. I'm calling them all out. The Harvard professors. The Harvard professors who say they want diversity so much. The white liberal Harvard professors who want diversity so much and single out the one black kid in the class every time a subject comes up about black people. Well, Sabrina, what do you think about that? Everybody turn and look at you. Those white liberals. That's Keith Olbermann. Now, I went on to say, let's remember what he said to Angel Reese. There's a pattern here. And you guys remember this? When he said to her, what an effing idiot. Not knowing the background of the story. For those who are not aware, this was during that championship game between LSU and Iowa. The LSU team was pretty much all black team. The Iowa team, pretty much all white team. And Keith Olbermann jumped into something that he didn't know the backstory about, not realizing that both teams were talking trash to each other. That's a part of the game. Now, this is someone who's was a sports commentator, and he don't understand this. I played basketball, okay? Off the court, everybody was cool. On the court, I am not your friend. And we all trash talked. He was upset because Angel Reese said, you see me? Not realizing that Caitlin Clark did the same thing to her. But he didn't call out Caitlin. He called out Angel. Because here we are again, Keith Olbermann thinking, okay, these girls are playing a good game, but she's not staying in line. She's not staying in her lane. How dare she act and behave that way? Look how he disrespected her. Oh, but don't worry. Other people got in this. Shaq called him out. A lot of people had Angel Reese's back. But the point is that Keith did not learn anything from that lesson. If he did, he wouldn't have come after Cornell West the way that he did. So what gives people like Keith this idea to think that they can just talk to people like this way? Because he's still on the damn plantation. He don't have on a MAGA hat. He don't have a Confederate flag hanging from his truck. You see, when you see those types of symbols, when people tell you to your face, and I live down south, so I know, people will tell you to your face, they'll let you know if they're not really trying to mess with black people like that, boo. White liberals different though. White liberals smile all cheek in your face, call the cops on you behind your back, and then run and hide. Think that they can talk to you any kind of way. Keith Olbermann still thinks he's massa, and he thinks that Dr. West need to get in line. That's the problem with people like Keith. And it's always a certain type. The PMC white liberals. Same ones I just told you about in Newton that don't want too many of those black kids coming to their schools. They feel they can disrespect you anytime. The moment you disagree, you're not in line, you're not living the way that they think that you should live, or you're not following the strategy they think that you should follow. They think they can disrespect you anytime. But the moment that you disrespect them, you're a problem. You're a thug. You need to be handled. You're a disciplinary issue. People like Keith Olbermann don't make the world a better place. People like Keith Olbermann actually make things worse because people like him actually give some black people in this country the idea that there is this type of solidarity from white liberals, only to then be turned around and stabbed in the back. Max Blumenthal called out Keith Olbermann years ago. This is from 2016. So Max said, from a basement studio, Keith Olbermann denounces Russian scum and the traitors who ignore his tirades. Welcome to the hashtag resistance. Listen to this.
The nation and all of our freedoms hang by a thread, and the military apparatus of this country is about to be handed over to scum who are beholden to scum, Russian scum. As things are today, January 20th will not be an inauguration, but rather the end of the United States as an independent country. It will not be a peaceful change of power. It will be a usurpation, and the usurper has no validity, no credibility, and no authority under the Constitution. This is a reality that will become the only reality until this country rids itself of Donald John Trump. He is not a president. He is a puppet put in power by Vladimir Putin. And those who ignore...
You know what's funny about this? He can admit Donald Trump is a puppet, but he can't admit that Joe Biden is also a puppet, owned by corporations.
Puppet put in power by Vladimir Putin. And those who ignore these elemental existential facts, Democrats or Republicans, are traitors to this country and will immediately and forever after be held accountable. Resist. Peace.
Dude was a freaking Russiagator. Completely got it wrong. Dude was a freaking Russiagator. Look at how stupid he looks. What the hell is this? Back says the anti-fascist resistance brought to you by Gentleman's Quarterly, GQ. They put this fool on the cover of the damn magazine. Do you see this? What the hell is this? How is the American flag making you resist, boo? What is this? Keith wants to protect the status quo. Keith is the white moderate that MLK warned you about. And I'm going to remind you of what MLK said. Then you'll see how it applies to people like Keith. Listen to this.
First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate.
Everybody heard that? Now, this is the letter from Birmingham jail. This is the piece about white moderates. So let's apply that to today, how people like Keith Olbermann want to insert like people like MAGA, right? If MLK was alive today, what would MLK tell you? Actually, the greatest threat is the white moderate. Let's continue.
Who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice.
The white moderate prefers order. And see, Cornell West is not following order, according to Keith Olbermann. He's stepping outside the lane. Moderates don't like that.
Who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action. Who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom.
Setting the timetable for another man's freedom. Now's not the time, guys. Yes, I know we need health care for everyone, but not right now. Now's not the time for a third party. Now's not the time for someone like Cornel West to run third party. We have to stop Trump. Next election cycle, do it then. It's never the time. Have you noticed that?
Who lives by a mythical concept of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season.
Listen to me, black man. I'm wearing black rimmed glasses, damn it. Listen to me and wait for the next time.
Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that law and order exist for the purpose of establishing justice, and that when they fail in this purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that block the flow to social progress.
Block the flow to social progress. No, guys, don't get out in the street. Not the time. No. Don't protest against this. Don't protest against that. It's okay to do it when Trump's in office, when Joe Biden's in office, and some of these things are still happening. No, don't do that. We need to support the Democratic Party. Otherwise, we're going to end up getting Donald Trump. Don't you do it.
I had hoped that white moderates would understand that the present tension in the South is a necessary phase of the transition from an obnoxious negative peace in which the Negro passively accepted his unjust plight to a substantive and positive peace in which all men will respect the dignity and worth of human personality. Actually, we who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension.
And Cornel West running third party is non-violent. But the way that Keith Olbermann speaks about it, and there's been multiple tweets of his, he speaks about it as though it is a violent action against the Democratic Party. It doesn't matter. Even when you're non-violent and when you're stepping out of line and you don't follow the status quo, they have issue.
We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. We bring it out in the open where it can be seen and dealt with, like a boil that can never be cured, so long as it is covered up, but must be open with all its ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light Injustice must be exposed with all the tension its exposure creates to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion before it can be cured. To the massive.
So that is a longer speech. I don't know if you guys have actually heard the entire speech, but if you haven't, you should. But that's letter from Birmingham jail. And that's often the phrase that people will refer to when they say MLK and the white moderate, because that is very important for people to hear and understand. And what you have to understand as well, Keith is a lost cause. I don't think he's trying to understand anything in reference to this. But what you have to understand as well is that some of the same people who shake your hand, they carry your signs, they let you think that they're there for you and they're part of the cause. Behind your back, they're just snakes. And the moment you start to move in a way that they don't like, that's how they do you. What he did to Dr. West. And he's not the only one, but he's an arrogant white liberal. He's a moderate. And this is how they get when you don't do what they want you to do. No respect. Let's be real. Who's been out there fighting for the people? Dr. West has decades history, protesting, marching with people, getting arrested, fighting for civil rights and rights for people in this country. Keith Olbermann, what has he done? And he's going to have the audacity to tell Dr. West, no, you're not doing this the right way. You see how cocky they can be? It's a mess. It's a mess. I'm going to go to some of the comments and then I'll be ready for part 2, Eric. Thank you for the super chat, CC. Love begone corruption. Ashura says Olbermann thought his tweet would do better than Cornell West. Yeah, man, that was not good for him. JB says the get out liberals. Yes, the ones who tell you I voted for Obama twice. I'm not racist. I'm not racist. I have a black friend. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. They'll also be first to move out. Also, Second Amendment term limits, 22nd term limits, 22nd Amendment term. I don't know what that says, but thank you, Roger. Thank you for the super chat, Battle Elf. Know your enemy. Thank you for the super chat, Mikey. Hashtag Cornell West 2024. Thank you for becoming a member, Zero Joshua. Whoop, whoop. And thank you, Cup of Joy. Roe talks out both sides of his mouth. Cornel West is the only unapologetic truth teller running for president. Bernie never addressed half of what Cornell does. Much respect, Dr. West. Thank you, Cup of Joy. Interesting times that we live in, but it just goes to show you that some things haven't really changed all that much, right? All right. We're moving on to this story here in reference to Russell Brand and Tucker Carlson. So first of all, I think this was the first time I saw Tucker Carlson do an interview on independent media. So this was huge. As you can imagine, the Russell Brand interview went viral. He even acknowledged that on one of his videos that he did after that video, that interview really took off. Now, there are two parts of that interview that I want to focus on. One in particular is about Donald Trump, RFK Jr., where Tucker Carlson addresses that. And the other one is in reference to the media and, believe it or not, climate change. And I was surprised about his position on one of these, but I think you need to hear this discussion. So we're going to go ahead and start with the first topic here. It's a long interview, by the way, so we broke it down to two parts.
So, I suppose what we're asking there is that it seems that you said that Trump was no longer relevant in the political conversation. He was no longer the lightning rod. He was no longer the berserker of American politics. Loads of people on our platform absolutely love Donald Trump. They see him as the solution to America's problems. They see him as the great swamp drainer. It seems you have occupied varying positions on Trump at various times. Where are you on Donald Trump now? And particularly perhaps how that relates to the emergence of radical anti-establishment figures within the Democrat Party, notably RFK.
So how does he feel about Donald Trump now? And then he's going to talk about RFK.
Where am I on Trump now? Well, I love Trump. Personally, I mean, I made a huge mistake last November in getting involved in American politics, something I've never done before, and making calls, this guy's going to win. I think this is going to happen in this state. Meet your new governor in New York, stuff like, and I was wrong on almost every call. I'm not a very astute political analyst. I'm not interested in politics. I never have been interested in politics. I'm interested in ideas. I'm interested in people.
So that part right there was kind of surprising when he said that he wasn't interested in politics. I was surprised by that because his show on Fox News mainly talked about politics a lot of the times, right? Now, granted, they don't always write their own script, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You are part of a network, so they sometimes will tell you which topics you can discuss and which ones you cannot. But I was very surprised to hear that. I can only imagine what it must feel like if it were me. Imagine if I wasn't into politics and I was doing this show. I would show up every night, just be like, yeah, and today, so Biden's polling at 70%. I couldn't fake it, put it that way.
And so there's a primary going on in the United States between Trump and a bunch of other people, primarily Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, but others, Vivek Ramaswamy, for example. And I haven't said word one about it, don't plan to. I think looking back on this 10 years from now, assuming we're still around, I think we're going to see Trump's emergence as the most significant thing to happen in American politics in 100 years, because he reoriented the Republican Party against the wishes of Republican leaders. But when I think about Trump right now, so it's July of 2023, I'm struck by his foreign policy views. Trump is the only person with stature in the Republican Party, really, who's saying, wait a second, why are we supporting an endless war in Ukraine?
Is that true? So this is something to think about. Now, this is one of the things that Norm Finkelstein and I did agree with the fact that if Trump were still in office, if he did win in 2020, both of us did believe that we probably would not have the conflict that we have right now with Russia and Ukraine, simply mainly because of the fact that Trump did not start new wars. Now, he still, supported drone strikes and things like that, but that was one area where both of us did agree that we probably would not have this issue right now with Russia and Ukraine. But is it true? Is he currently right now the one that's a part of the Republican Party that's really pushing back against this? Because if you look at the other candidates, Ron DeSantis, the flip-flopper, we don't know where he really at. 1 minute he said he supported it, 1 minute he said he didn't support it. He all over the place. Nikki Haley is a warmonger. I can tell you from experience, she used to be my state governor when I lived in South Carolina. I know how she stands. Tim Scott, no backbone. Who's the other one? Vivek, I think is one. I have to see where he stands on this. But Trump has been more vocal about it. Now, there are some conservative politicians in Congress that have been, kind of vocal about this as well. But I mean, I will say there's a difference between just being against this war and being against all wars. Because for me, it's I'm against all of them. I'm not trying to pick and choose here. I don't think we should have war at all. But I think that Tucker also has to realize that Trump is running for office. And right now, there is a sentiment amongst not just conservatives, but a lot of people in this country that are just tired of the wars. And so there is a base for that. So he is a candidate. So Tucker should, just keep that in his head, the fact that he is trying to win votes. So he knows how to speak to a room and he knows how to read the room. This is something where Biden does not do well. So he knows how to read the room. So he knows that there is a base for this. So that's something to think about as well.
And that, leaving aside whether Trump's going to get the nomination or get elected president or would be a good president, I can't even assess that. All I can say at this point is I'm so grateful that he has that position. He's right. And everyone in Washington's wrong. Everyone. And Trump is right on that question. And it's a big question. That war is reshaping the world. It's reshaping the economy of the world. It's reshaping populations. I was just in Romania last week, which is, of course, shares a border with Ukraine. The refugees in that region, the number of people killed in that war. Europe will never be the same because of this war. And
it's changing everything. And I just told you about the alliances right now. Like I told you about Turkey's trying to join the EU. Sweden wants to join NATO. Like it's a mess now, and it is changing things. And I wonder where we'll all be this time next year.
Really matters. And Trump alone among popular figures in both parties understands that, and I'm grateful for it. Whether he gets the nomination or gets elected, words really matter. Saying something true out loud matters. And he is saying true things about Ukraine, and God bless him. That's how I feel.
So Trump generated, I suppose, a new type of populism. He rebooted politics. He reordered the Republican Party. And but perhaps, is it fair to say that other than the significant fact that he was less militaristic significantly than other comparable presidents, at least recent presidents, I mean by that, do you think that he delivered in office? Why do you think he remains so fascinating? Do you think that the Americans, broadly speaking, that are attracted to Donald Trump are attracted by his foreign policy stance, or do you think that there's something else? And do you not think that RFK, who's my understanding, he's been on the show a couple of times, he's now on Rumble, and I find him to be a very admirable man. He similarly is vehemently anti-war, anti this conflict, and seems to also have identified the unspoken intention to be the deracination and annihilation of Russia for globalist and economic reasons, rather than the rather naive assumption that it's in any way a humanitarian conflict.
I'm just going to sum that up because Russell's questions are really long. He's asking, does Tucker Carlson think that people like Trump because of his foreign policy, stance, or do you think it's a different reason, et cetera? And Tucker said, no, it's not, because I don't think it's because of that either. Because remember, we didn't have this war with Russia and Ukraine when Trump ran in 2016 or when he ran in 2020. So I don't necessarily think like that's the reason. I think the reason was that he knew how, again, he knows how to read a room. He knew how to speak to working class people in a way to let them know that they were forgotten, in a way that Hillary Clinton did not speak to that. So I think that's where a lot of like Trump's base came from, the people who felt like the workers, the people who felt like they were forgotten. Like, yes, are there some people who are Trump supporters that are racist? Yes, there are. But there are also people who support Joe Biden that are also racist too. They got that covert racism. It may not be overt, but they have the covert racism. So, regardless of how you look at it, I think the winning formula for a candidate on the national level these days is going to be, can you speak to the working class? And now that we do have this war with Russia and Ukraine, you're going to have to talk about that. And I think if you can explain to people why we need to call peace and we need to end this conflict, I think you're going to win over some people in that area this time around as well.
Democracy. That's my favorite. It's for democracy. Okay. Say the people who hate democracy. Well, I love Bobby Kennedy, and I've had him on my show many times. He announced for president on my show, which took a lot of stones on his part, given how despised I am by a lot of Democratic primary voters. I think he's a wonderful person. I'll say that. Just as a man, I admire him. He said the greatest thing any politician or any public figures ever said to me at dinner a couple of years ago. They've gone after his family. The pharma companies and their agents in the media have really gone after his family, his siblings. They convinced a bunch of his siblings to denounce his views. So painful. And I'm so close to my family, I can't even imagine that. And I said to him, what's that like? I thought I took a lot of shit. I can't even imagine what that would be like. If my brother denounced me, I'd probably shoot myself. I couldn't handle it.
Also, if it was Buck, he would be able to provide the weapon.
He would. Yeah. Well, yeah.
The family thing to me is just, I think RFK Jr. comes from, he's Kennedy, so he comes from one of those old school families where family is really, really important and it really does matter. But to me, it's like the family thing. Like I know so many people that are millennials like me that like a lot of people that I know just do not have that type of relationship with their families that like the Kennedys may have, for example. People are all over the place. Like some people live overseas, some people live here, that kind of thing. That's immediate family, but then also there's your extended family. And I don't think it's as uncommon today for millennials and Gen Z to not necessarily have that really tight relationship with like the extended family as it was for people like Tucker Carlson and maybe people like RFK Jr.
My brother's not going to denounce me. It's my best friend and wonderful man. But anyway, so I said to him, what's that like? And he said, and I'm quoting, I probably shouldn't be quoting a private conversation, but he said this to me. He said, I've got 7 children and they all love me. I don't care.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, you want to distill my values into a sentence? That's the sentence. So I really admire him. I don't agree with him on everything. I do agree with him, I'll just be honest, on most things, on the big things.
Yeah.
And so, no, I love what he's doing. I love his bravery, which is just remarkable. The amount that man has suffered for what he thinks is true, the amount of money he's lost, the friends he's lost. He's been ostracized in a way most people can't even understand.
But isn't that sad, though? Isn't that sad that RFK Jr. actually lost friends or relationships with family members because of what he believes about Big Pharma? Like, that's just very, to me, it's like, I've seen like families and friends forgive people for worse things. Desert Mantis says, if my family had money, I'd be closer to it. Way to keep it real, Desert Mantis.
Is he ticked off a drug company? Really? And he's persevered, and I really admire him.
If RFK and Trump have risen, as they plainly have, to capture the popular imagination, and yet both to a degree are stymied, shackled, or reluctantly tolerated by their party, what does that tell us about the shifting sands of American political life? I think the area where you and I most plainly and overtly align, perhaps other than the belief in God, I suppose, is our deep understanding that the military-industrial complex and big pharma are able to exert significant power over the Democratic Party, a democratic process that renders ordinary electoral politics basically meaningless.
Yes.
These two figures are like populist anti-establishment figures in a sense. What do you feel is the likelihood of either of them being able to pass through the internal mechanics of their parties, in the case of RFK, through the legal hurdles that are being placed in front of Trump at the moment? And what is the role of independent media, in particular, say, a figure like Elon Musk, who seems, at the moment at least, to have the power to fight on that terrain? I know there was a lot in that question, Tucker, but you've got...
Yeah, so this part was really pretty interesting to me because I honestly think he's talking about them fighting with the internal workings of their political parties. We already know the Democratic Party is going to try to cheat RFK Jr., right? But in reference to the Republican Party, in reference to the GOP, right now, Trump is in the lead, like way in the lead. DeSantis isn't even like it. I can't imagine any of those candidates like beating him for the Republican nomination. I don't see that possible or as happening. Also, the Republican Party doesn't have super delegates. Democratic Party does. And this is how they were able to do what they did to Bernie Sanders, actually.
I'd say a couple things. One, the United States has had precisely in 250 years almost one populist president. And that was Teddy Roosevelt, also the most popular president in American history, who was president from 1901. President was who he served as VP was shot to death until 1908. Most popular president the United States ever had, and he was a populist. The two biggest populist figures in the moment are Trump and Bobby Jr., and then we had a guy called Ross Perot run about 30 years ago who roughly had the same politics.
Ross Perot got like 18% of the vote as an independent, you guys. Can you believe that? You know, they had to change the rules after that. Ross Perot cost the election. They said Ross Perot cost the election for Bush Sr. They said he's the reason why Bush did not win re-election. You know, and after that, they were like, we got to change the rules for these independent and third-party candidates.
All four of those figures had one thing in common. They were all from the world they criticized. So you think of populist, you know, the English peasant revolt,
yes,
which is one of the most interesting things ever to happen, where they stormed the Tower of London and killed, I think they killed the Archbishop.
I'm from there. That started in Essex.
Yes.
Wat Tyler.
Yeah, Wat Tyler, exactly. We're not even sure if that was his real name. And
Wat
Tyler. And, but he was a legit peasant. Like, we don't even know when he was born. And that was not an effective rebellion. Of course, they did not free the serfs after that, as I recall. But the effective populists are the ones who critique from the inside and say, I grew up in this world. Teddy Roosevelt grew up rich, of course, in New York. Trump, Perot, Bobby Kennedy's family is one of the most famous families in the world in modern history, the Kennedys, and certainly the most famous family in Democratic politics. So these are people who know how the system works because they've benefited from the system. And so their critique is much more meaningful and much more effective, I would say, because they can bear witness to what they have seen.
Right. So these are the people that some people refer to as class traitors. Now, I don't think Trump was a class traitor, though. Trump still looked out for his rich buddies. Let's just be real. Like, it is what it is. He wasn't going to hurt himself there financially either. So those are those types of people that they would call like class traitors. And you got to be wary with them, especially if it's someone who's a billionaire, okay, or someone who's a million. Like, you got to be wary with some of them because, you know, some of them, they're all about like, yeah, I'm a class traitor until there's legislation passed that affects their financial interests. So you just got to just keep that in mind.
I don't think Trump has changed politics in Washington. I think the parties both have been very resistant to any kind of reform. And that's very foolish. That's a Ceausescu move. You see things changing around you and you can't metabolize it. You can't sort of change with the moment. And then you meet a bad end when you become that rigid. I think that Bobby Kennedy and Trump will both have a very tough time getting the nomination. I'm hoping that both of them will, of course, I guess. I'm hoping that their message will be heard. I don't know. I don't even know what I hope for in the process itself, but I want them to be heard. And they can now be heard because there are channels of information that people can tune into and listen. I mean, I would amend one thing you said when you said that, you know, these huge multinationals control our politics. Well, they also control our media.
Yeah.
They do. I mean, pharma, as you well know and often say on your show, is the biggest advertiser on American television. Probably true in the UK as well.
I still remember during the 2020 Democratic primary debates, there were actually commercials, pharma commercials against Medicare for all.
And so, you know, there's no incentive whatsoever to question their products. And now we have, because of the social media companies, Twitter and Rumble, and probably others, we have less filtered sources of information with fewer gatekeepers and a higher probability you'll hear something true. I think that.
But we're suppressed, Tucker. Who's going to tell Tucker how bad independent media is suppressed on YouTube? But even a Rumble, if you're not on the homepage on Rumble, it's going to be hard for people to find you. But who's going to tell Tucker Carlson about the suppression of independent media channels on YouTube? We're heavily suppressed unless you're TYT, and well, they're not independent anymore, they're corporate. But unless you're one of the channels that has a channel within YouTube, which means that you are actually a part of YouTube like TYT is, so they push you to the front of the algorithm with corporate news. Other than that, it is very hard to find independent media nowadays. I feel sorry for like anybody like starting a channel now. And I know it's been hard for me too, but I started 2 years ago. Anyone starting a channel now, if you don't have like somebody like that's huge, really helping you and propping you up or promoting you, good luck, buddy, because be patient, because the suppression is worse now than it was 2 years ago when I started.
That's a huge change. I mean, how can you And this is like samizdat. This is like, this is like information that the people in charge don't want you to see. And now you can see it. It really is the promise of the internet finally fulfilled. That's my hope anyway.
Okay, and we have to pause there because they get into a conversation that I can't discuss on YouTube. I know some of you were asking me, where is this? Yeah, so this is on Rumble because of some of the things that they talked about in this interview, they didn't put the entire interview on YouTube. There's only like small parts of it on YouTube. But yeah, if you want to see the full one, you have to watch this on Rumble. Now I want to get to the part where they go into more discussion in reference to independent media.
Well, I think my role is to tell the truth to the extent I can see it, to say what I think is true, always with the knowledge that we see everything, through a glass darkly. We don't see things clearly. We don't have perspective on ourselves, the world around us. We get a lot wrong. I've gotten a lot wrong, that's for sure. But you do your best. And you cannot allow people to force you to lie, period. So that's how I see my role.
It's interesting because I wish I could play it, but I can't. But there's a part of this interview in reference to forcing people to lie where he talks about what really happened, what really went down at Fox. And I can't play it because it's about January, what happened that January. And even when they get to that part, they say we're moving off of YouTube now and we're moving just to Rumble and locals. So you won't even see that conversation. You won't see it on like I said, most of the interview is not on YouTube for a reason, but it's unfortunate I can't play that for you. But the reason why I'm telling you this is because one of the things that he mentioned in reference to Fox wanting him gone had to do with him trying to correct lies about that particular month. So use your imagination and you can watch the full interview after this if you want.
I think you're asking the right question. And I asked the same thing about the climate movement. I mean, I'm bewildered by it. Apart from my own family, there's nothing more important to me than nature. I think I spend an above average time in nature. Amount of time. I mean, I've organized my whole life to be in nature. So I really, really care about it. And I'm very upset about the many ways in which it's despoiled, at least in my country. I mean, nature's not doing well. The environmental movement is gone where I live.
This is the part that was very surprising to me. I did not think that Tucker Carlson was concerned about nature or the environment or like he goes on to say more, but I was really surprised to hear that because you would assume based on the conversations that he had on his show on Fox News that he didn't really believe in issues in reference to climate change or the environment or anything like that. But again, this goes to show you the difference between when you're working for someone, a mainstream media network, and then when you're not, and you can talk more freely and tell people how you really feel. I also didn't know, he also mentions this in this interview, that apparently he lives in Western Maine. So this is all like kind of new to me. And I mean, I go to Maine every summer, but this is kind of new to me because now this makes more sense because I'm like, if you live in Maine, like, yeah, there's certain New England in general, people here really do take like the environment seriously, more seriously than any state I've lived in, whether it's the recycling, whether it's the composting, like they take it more seriously anywhere else that I've lived. And people that live in Maine really do care about the state. And they also care about keeping things local and organic. And, there's an element of California, I think, that has that as well. But that is one big difference I can say about Maine. Massachusetts doesn't have a lot of chains either. But when I go to Maine, it's a whole different thing. Like most things are local or it's from the farm, like that kind of stuff, right? So I was shocked to hear this. I didn't know any of this, but I was surprised to hear that he actually does care about the environment. And listen to what else he's going to go on to say about profit.
And we pollute, we put up chain stores and strip malls and pave things we should not pave. We are very tough on nature in the United States. And the environmental movement does nothing to stop that. And so my question for the climate people, and I have no doubt the climate is changing. It's always changed. I live in a place that was completely sculpted by the glaciers, which only melted 10,000 years ago. There were people living where I live in northwestern Maine when the glaciers receded 10,000, the Native Americans, 10,000 years ago. So like this is a feature of life on Earth. And so I have no doubt it's changing again. And I would be completely open to the possibility that people's behavior is accelerating that change or driving it to some extent. It doesn't sound crazy to me. I don't think it's proven, but I'm open to it. Of course I am. My question is really simple. Which of your solutions to climate change disempower you? So when you act, you're a father, on behalf of your children, you are doing things because you love them. They're not necessarily in your interest. Like you'd rather go take a sauna or do some yoga or hop on your wife. But no, you have a child with needs, so you love that child, so you do something for that child. That's what it looks like to serve and love someone, is to do something you don't want to do, that doesn't help you in any way, but at least potentially helps that other person. I see the climate movement not doing one thing that doesn't enrich or empower the climate movement and its corporate sponsors. Not one. So
this part right here, I got to call out a couple of groups. Sunrise Movement. We've talked about this before on RBN, where some of these environmental groups or organizations, it's like they made a lot of money, but we don't really see them doing anything. Sunrise Movement has gotten donations from people like George Soros. I mean, I'm talking a lot of money. Okay. There's all these different environmental organizations like we're the climate this and we're the environment this. And they get all this money. Like they have a lot of donors, rich people who donate to these organizations, but I don't see them producing anything. So I have to ask, like, where does the money go? And then if you look at an organization like Sunrise Movement, they're always out there like endorsing like progressive candidates to run through the Democratic Party. But then those candidates that win, that get in, they don't really push for these issues either the way that they're supposed to. So it's just, what happens to all the money? And I've been wondering this for a while. Okay. I mean, I think it's great to have organizations. I think it's great to have people that care about these issues. But there's two different things here. There's caring, and along with that, educating. But then there's also action. And when it comes to the action part, I don't see anything happening. I don't see any types of solutions, you know? So where does all that money go? Like, I couldn't believe he said this. Like, when he said this, I was like, well, I'll be damned. Think about it.
For example, not to be boorish here in lecture, but I'll stop with this. Like, if I understand, the ecology correctly, trees are like helpful if you're worried about rising CO2, correct? Because they consume it and then emit what? Oxygen. So if you're really worried about climate change caused by carbon dioxide, you'd probably be planting a lot of trees. I don't see a ton of, and I would be very for that as someone who truly loves trees and spends a lot of time thinking about trees. And
you guys hearing this?
I have a lot of trees and maintain a lot of trees. I love trees almost more than anything. So, like, where's the nationwide effort to reforest the United States?
We got to pause here for just a second as well. That's another thing. Instead of growing more trees, people are cutting them down. Companies are cutting trees down so that they can build strip malls. Do you need another strip mall? They're cutting them down so that they can build, let's build some more housing. You have housing. If you reduce the price so that people can afford it, that would help with the homelessness crisis that we have in this country. They kill me when they say, we don't have enough housing. We do. You gave it to BlackRock. You let BlackRock buy it. And they made it unaffordable for the average working class American. That's what happened to the housing. I can't buy, like right now, if I were to try to buy today, there's no way I could do it now. No way. If it wasn't for like those interest rates dropping during the pandemic, buddy, no, there's no way. And I'm looking at houses online because I still get those update emails. Forgot to hit unsubscribe. I'm looking at houses online that have like 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, these houses 2-3 years ago in certain areas in the States would have gone for like maybe $500,000. That still is fucking expensive, but I live in Massachusetts and gotten used to it. These houses that are not even renovated, got carpet falling apart, they're selling these houses for like $650,000 today. So it's just, I'm here to tell you, people aren't trying to organize to plant trees because companies like BlackRock and some of these mayors that are in bed with these investors, these real estate investors, they're all working to cut the trees down to build more housing for rich people, not for you. Let's wrap this up here.
Don't see it. Instead, I see a lot of solar panels from China that don't work, that actually wreck the environment. Industrial wind farms that wreck where I live. Like, I live near them. I know what they do. They kill all these birds of prey. It's like they're destroying the environment, but they're becoming richer. So on January 6th, tell me one solution that doesn't make you more powerful.
Yeah.
And then I have to pause there because they get into the, they get into that other part of the conversation. But I think, guys, if you do have time and you get a minute, go over to Rumble, Russell Brand. It's called Live, Tucker Carlson, world first interview since leaving Fox. And you can watch the full interview there. Okay. Because like I said, some things I just can't, I can't show on here. I'm sorry. But I think you need to see that, guys. I really do. I think you might be surprised by some of the things that you hear. Now, I still disagree with Tucker Carlson on many things, many things. But the climate issue there to me was pretty interesting. So if you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and hit that like button, guys. That helps me out with the algo. Thank you very much. I'm going to hit up these comments here. And then I have a shout out I want to do. Thank you for the super chat, Mr. Missing. We got to save the democracy, black man. Maybe we can address your plight next time. White liberal. There you go. That's well said. Robert says, I think this war will be U.S. biggest foreign policy blunder. I can see it heading in that direction. Deneen says, I'm suspicious that they would allow a real dissenting voice to have 6 million subscribers. He also has 33 tattooed on his arm, as in 33rd degree Mason. It's probably because, he is a celebrity. So maybe that's why they let Russell Brand kind of get away with some of those things. Like I said, he has received red flag on, I know one of his videos got a red flag one time, and that was when he said he was going to be going live on Rumble. So they've hit him too. But yeah, I think it's because he's a celebrity. That could be part of it. But he does good work. She's Black said, I'm sorry, but it's hard for me to feel sorry for a wealthy political family member. I hear you, She's Black. Thank you, Quintessential. KB and Kyle's second wedding idea, let Cornell officiate, LOL. You guys got jokes tonight. Brian said that Bush sabotaged Ross Perot, threatened to release dirt on his daughter. Okay, I didn't know about that. I'm going to look that up, Brian. And thank you for the super chat, Roger. Theo didn't get elected 4 times like his cousin, Tucker. That's a good point. Yeah. I don't know if I would say that Theo was the most popular one. I don't know if I'd say that. I thought FDR was the most popular one. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric, and then we'll get to the shout out. Yeah. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. I hit a YouTube milestone allowing me to super chat for free, but for some reason, StreamYard doesn't record it, but it was a part 1 that did not show up to me talking about the 22nd term limit. What I said was, you mentioned congressional term limits. When they drafted the 22nd Amendment term limiting the president, exempting Congress and SCOTUS, the state should have rejected it until Congress included themselves. Ooh, interesting. They also believe in keeping things white by keeping it cold. Black folks don't like the cold, Sabby. Dwayne is the only brother up there. Stay warm and keep safe, Dwayne. Blink twice if you need us to come in there and rescue you. Oh no. Jokes. I got them. I love Mainers. Remember, they just put on the ballot this November public power. We just passed New York state law allowing for the New York Power Authority, created by Governor FDR's largest public power authority in the country, to completely take over the providing of power throughout the state with an aim to cut fossil fuels out the mix by 70% by 2040. This would be outlawing private power in New York State. That's huge, while giving municipalities the choice to municipalize their own power, like we're doing with Long Island Power Authority. That's huge. Well said, Roger. All right. I got a shout out tonight. We got to hear some good news. And I think I'm going to try to do a shout out at least once every week. Actually, I went to the wrong thing. Hold on. You may remember about a year ago, there was an athlete by the name of Sha'Carri Richardson. Now, she was to participate in the Olympics, and she was removed from the Olympics because she tested positive for weed or whatever. And a lot of us had an outcry about that. We're like, really? Like, it's a plant. What's the big deal? Well, if you were not aware, Sha'Carri Richardson blasts drug double standards in Olympic sports. Richardson was barred from last year's games for smoking weed. Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs 6 weeks ago and is still allowed to compete. Now, this was February 14th, 2022. Just to remind you, Sha'Carri Richardson is speaking out after Russian figure skater Kamila was allowed to compete at the Beijing Winter Olympics despite reportedly testing positive for trametazine, a drug used to treat chest pain. The World Anti-Doping Agency lists this as a prohibited metabolic modulator that could potentially function as a stimulant. Can we get a solid answer on the difference between her situation and mine, which came from Richardson? My mother died and I can't run, and was also favored to place top 3. The only difference I see is I'm a Black young lady. Last year, Richardson was dropped. Uh-oh, what just happened? Okay, that's weird. Let me refresh. Sorry. I don't know what happened there. I might have clicked on something. Where did I go? Oh, this part. Last year, Richardson was dropped from Team USA for the relay and the 100-meter race at the Tokyo Olympics after she tested positive for marijuana, which is not considered a performance-enhancing drug, but it's nevertheless banned. In her case, U.S. Track and Field gave away her spot on the team before it got to the International Olympic Committee. Well, it appears that maybe Sha'Carri may have had the last laugh because she is now the national champion. And for me, this video is everything. I had to mute it because there is music. But for me, it's the moment when she takes off the wig. This did it for me. So you knew it was coming. You knew she was ready to win. And so all I can say, there's the wig on the wig's on the ground, like goodbye. This is on TikTok, by the way, for those of you who wanted to see it. You knew she came to win. On your mark, get set, go. I'm ahead of the announcer here, sorry. And they're off. And so here's her right here. And she pulls ahead. And there you go. So she did the damn thing. So shout out to Sha'Carri Richardson becoming the national champion. And you knew it. You knew it. When the wig came off, you knew it. So, karma. Karma, karma, karma. And this came from Kenny. Kenny said, congratulations, Sha'Carri Richardson, national champion. She did the damn thing. So that's payback for you. That is payback. All right, all right. I have an update in reference to the Ohio ballot initiative that I covered. I'm going to have to cover that on Thursday because that's important that you guys need to see. So I'll get to that on Thursday. Sorry, Roger. But other than that, guys, I hope you had a good night tonight. It is Tuesday. It is time for me to head out. But yeah. I will not be here tomorrow. It's Wednesday. I'm off on Wednesdays. I'll be back Thursday evening, so stay tuned. And also, don't forget, before I'm live on here Thursday evenings, I'm live on RBN with JB for the JB and Sabby show. So definitely join us there. Should be fun times. You know, we always keep it 100. But other than that, guys, have a good night. Keep up the fight.